One of the main reasons, of course, to use SharePoint is as a collaboration tool. That I want my users to be able to upload and manage and work together on items, documents, etc. Now, in order to make sure that our users can do this effectively, they need to be able to locate, find, and connect with one another. And fortunately, SharePoint gives us the ability to manage exactly that through user profiles and My Sites. Now, user profiles and My Sites are technically two separate things. Now, the user profile is going to be the information about the user, while the My Site is going to be the actual site that's going to be created that my user can use to share out information about themselves or share out just simply documents and other normal SharePoint items. Now we're going to break this apart into two separate lessons. We're going to take a look at setting up and configuring our My Sites a little bit later. For right now, we want to get in and take a look at how to set up, configure, and get up and running our user profiles. Now this, of course, begs the question about social networking and why social networking is so important inside of SharePoint. Basically, this is what user profiles and My Sites are in SharePoint. They're Facebook. Now, every now and then when I say that, I'll get an interesting response that sometimes people say, oh, well, you shouldn't say that Facebook is a bit of a dirty word. Or I've had people say, oh, you should really use LinkedIn rather than Facebook. The reason, honestly, that I use Facebook is for a couple of different reasons. Number one is because that's the one that most people have the experience with. But also number two is that when you get in, you take a look at somebody's My Site, especially now in SharePoint 2013, it just screams Facebook. And on top of that, it's not as if we don't make the analogy that our users aren't going to connect the dots. I mean, they're going to take one look at it and they're going to go, oh, well, this is Facebook. And that's okay, because this is actually a good thing. That this can increase productivity. This can allow your users to be able to connect with one another in ways that we wouldn't have been able to previously. And it also allows your users to self-promote. Let's break this down a little bit. How can our users connect? Well, let's take a very common scenario. Let's take a meeting. If I've got an organization that's larger than probably about 30 or 40 people, chances are I don't know everybody inside the organization. So now all of a sudden I get a meeting invite, need to be in X conference room at Y time, and I look through the list of people, and there's a name on there that I don't recognize. Well, now I need to figure out who that is. Because after all, this could be maybe somewhere in senior management that I've never met, that I want to be able to impress. So what I could do is I could go off, look up their profile, get a real quick picture, get a synopsis of who they are, and then also maybe find out a little bit of personal information about them as well. Because if I'm going to try and connect with somebody, being able to do that on a personal level is extremely important. So if I find out that they're a football fan, if I find out that they're a runner, this gives me different things that I can talk with them about to be able to create a bond, to be able to create a connection with that person. Having our user profiles is also extremely helpful with out-of-office messages. I can't tell you the number of times that I run into this scenario, that I send an email to Susan, and I say, hey, Susan, I need you to do XYZ. And I get the out-of-office reply saying, sorry, I'm on vacation. Please contact Dave. Okay, fine. So I go ahead and I email Dave, hey, Dave, can you do this for me? And then I get the email back saying, sorry, I'm out of the office. Please contact Susan. Nuts. Well, what I need to do is I need to find somebody else inside that department that I can send my request on off to. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to do that by utilizing the user profile. So I could go pull up Susan's user profile and see who else is in Susan's department. And then that way I can figure out who it is that I need to bug next with my request. Now, SharePoint user profiles can also be great for doing skill set searches. That maybe we're looking at implementing a brand new policy. Or maybe we're looking at things and we're starting to realize that we shouldn't, or that we're not as productive as we should be. That maybe we're noticing that we've got a relatively high loss rate when it comes to manufacturing widgets. So what I want to do is I want to go off and I want to find people that have maybe worked for our competitors in the past. Kind of pick their brains, find out what it is that they used to do to help ensure that production was as seamless as possible. Well, what I could do is I could go in, do a search, and then be able to find all of the people that worked for our competitor and maybe worked in the production plants for our competitors. And then finally, last but not least, searching user profiles can be very helpful for team building. That maybe I want to put together a pool for the NCAA March Madness tournament. Or maybe I want to put together a group of runners to train for a half marathon. Help build morale. I'm a big believer that happy employees are productive employees. So if I can build morale, that's going to help improve productivity. So I can go off, do a search, and find all the different people that have self-identified themselves as football fans, as runners, and then reach out to them, and away we go from there. Now, user profiles are also very helpful in self-promotion. If you're in a very large organization, one of the things that you should be doing is always looking for what the next move is. What's my next job? Where can I go from here? Now, in order for me to be able to do that, I need to be able to show off to the world, hey, this is who I am. I need to be able to share my ideas, but I want to be able to do so in a way that's safe, in a way that's going to ensure that I'm still going to get credit for my ideas. This is where user profiles, my sites, can really shine. First of all, when you set up a profile, you're going to notice that you're going to get a blog site. So that way I can go off and I can blog my ideas. Maybe I'm a salesperson. And maybe I worked for a couple of months on a contract. And sure enough, managed to land the client. And so what I want to do is I want to be able to share exactly how I did that with the rest of my team, but make sure that everybody knows that it was me who did that. It was my ideas. And this is where blogs come into play. So I can go off, I can create my blog is going to be on my site, it's going to have my name. So whenever anybody sees it, they're going to very easily see, oh look, that was Christopher who did that. Now it also gives us the opportunity to do microblogging, or in the terms of Facebook, status updates, or in the terms of Twitter, tweets. And you might be looking at this and you might be going, well, why in the world am I ever going to be interested in this in a corporate environment? Well, part of it can be just simply a way for your users to kind of feel like they're connected with everybody else, that it's kind of a neat little way to kind of see what else is going on in your organization. What else are people working on? This can also be very helpful for certain corporate cultures. That I remember my last full-time job that I had years and years and years ago is I had a micromanager for a boss. And so we constantly had to be emailing them, telling them, hey, this is what we're working on. So a much less intrusive way to handle that is just to do microblogging, that I can just go ahead and post, hey, this is what I'm currently working on. So that way they can very easily just go look at my wall and see what it is that I'm doing. So that way I'm not having to send out an email every couple hours. And it can also be kind of a nice way to maybe announce out what it is that you're doing and then allow for connection. So maybe I go in, I'm looking through my newsfeed, and I see, oh, look, Brian's working on the Johnson account. So I can say, you know what, I've got a little something that I'd like to be able to contribute, or I'd like to maybe offer Brian a little bit of help, a little bit of support. Maybe I've got a little bit of background knowledge there. And so now I can go ahead and connect with him. And then finally, last but not least, is self-identified experts. When you get hired on at a new company, one of the things that quite frequently happens is people will keep coming up to you during the first few weeks, and they'll keep asking you, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? And chances are you probably don't. Because you just took the job. You just took the role. You don't know enough yet to ask questions. You don't even know what your job is. About your only question might be, hey, where's the restroom? Where can I get a cup of coffee? And after that, you might not have any other questions. Well, now you've been on the roll for a good 2, 3, 4 months, and now you've got questions. Maybe you need to figure out how to work with a SharePoint environment. Maybe you need to figure out benefits. And I want to figure out who it is that's going to be best to talk to. And this is where being able to go off to the SharePoint site and do a search for people who have self-identified as experts in whatever it is that I'm looking for answers in can be extremely helpful. Now, having social networking inside your environment does sometimes raise people's concerns. And quite frequently, you're going to maybe get a little bit of pushback on implementing social networking. Then one of the things that people will mention is privacy concerns. I don't want this information to be shared. Well, my response to that is twofold. Number one is that SharePoint offers you some pretty good controls as far as ensuring privacy. And number two, this is inside of your environment. So the only way anybody's going to be able to see your profile page is if they had access to your network and to your SharePoint environment in the first place. This is not going to be published out to the web. People also sometimes get concerned about productivity. This is really the reason why that people don't like hearing Facebook whenever I bring this up. Because they hear Facebook and they think lost productivity. Because after all, people can spend hours on Facebook. I am absolutely 100% guilty of that. But this isn't Facebook. Honestly, after going in and setting up your profile and periodically posting in your status updates and maybe doing a little bit of message boards, after that, there's just not a whole heck of a lot else to do there. So there's just not going to be a whole lot of opportunity to lose productivity, that there is no Farmville or Mafia Wars or whatever it is that people are playing these days on Facebook inside of SharePoint. It's not Facebook. And then last but not least is people get concerned about security. What it is that people might post on their wall that they shouldn't. Well, there's a lot of outlets that people could be sharing information that they shouldn't be. Email's a great example of that. And when it comes to SharePoint, SharePoint is, of course, on your network. Chances are in your environment, when you hire on somebody new, they sign an AUP. They sign an acceptable use policy. And that's going to cover every single aspect of your network, which certainly would include their company-issued laptop that they're using to access via the company network your company's SharePoint implementation. So when it comes to security, I'm not overly concerned here either. It's still inside of your environment. Now, as far as some of the different components of social networking in 2013, we've got our user profiles, which, like we mentioned, that's going to be where people can have information about themselves, and then their My Sites, which is going to be their pages that they're going to be updating their profile on and then sharing whatever other items it is they might want to share out. You can also go in and set up community sites, which will allow people to basically create pages, to use a Facebook analogy here, that I can create a page that's going to be dedicated to maybe some project or some department or whatever else it is that you might want to be able to post information about. And then finally, last but not least, is again that microblogging. User profiles in My Sites are going to be managed through the User Profile Service application. So let's talk a little bit about what this application is going to bring to the table. The first big thing that this is going to bring to the table is your user profile. This is the About Me section. So this is going to be my skills, this is going to be my hobbies, this is going to be my past employers, this is going to have my headshot. Now, we do have the ability to sync this with an external source. In fact, you're basically always going to do that. And so I could sync this with Active Directory, or I could sync this with any other third-party implementation that I might have user information. Now, in order to set this up, a couple of prerequisites need to be in place. we will need the manage metadata service. The main reason that we're going to need manage metadata is for our keywords. One of the things that we want people to be able to do is to self-identify themselves as experts. Well, the catch here is that in order for this to be worthwhile, there needs to be some level of consistency here, and this is where keywords really shine. Because by using keywords, now what's going to happen is my users will be allowed to type in basically whatever it is they want, but they are going to be prompted to keep using the same values. So that way, I can very easily find somebody with the same skill sets because everybody will have been prompted to use the same values. We're also going to need the search service set up so that way we actually get people search. And then finally, last but not least, if you are going to import data from a third party, then you will need BCS setup, Business Connectivity Services, which will allow us to create the connection to that third party application. In order to set up our permissions, two little things need to happen. Number one is that the SharePoint farm account must be a member of local administrators. Now, this is only needed when we're starting the user profile sync service for the first time. Once it's started, then you can go ahead and take that account out of local administrators. The other very big thing that needs to happen is that the service account that you're going to use for user profiles, if it's going to be connecting to Active Directory, must be delegated the replicating directory changes permission inside of Active Directory. Now, when you set up the application, you're going to notice that it's going to prompt you for a few databases. It's going to prompt you for a social database, and that's where things like tags and rankings are going to be stored. It's going to ask you for a profile database, and that's where all your user profiles are going to be stored. And then it's going to ask you about a sync database, and that's going to be used for temporary storage while we're going off and doing a sync. You can also configure My Sites. That can actually be done later, and we're going to take a look at it in a later lesson. Now, the user profile sync service, this one is a bit of a bear. Getting this started for the first time can be a little bit frustrating. That you are going to notice that it will take several minutes for it to start. Now, if it turns out that it doesn't start, if it just hangs there for 15-20 minutes, or if it just simply kicks back to stopped, a couple of things to check. Number one, make sure that your farm account is a member of local administrators. Number two, try the fix-all for SharePoint, which of course is IIS reset. And number three is try to restart the computer. And honestly, when it comes to setting up user profiles, I always like to just restart the computer right away, just take out a little bit of insurance, just because I find that I get a better success rate if I do that. Now let's get in and take a look at how to set up the user profile service. Now, I've done a little bit of background work already. My farm account is already a member of local administrators. But I do need to delegate control to our SP service account. So I'm going to do that. And then we also need to get in and set up our service. So let's take a look at how this is going to be done. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by delegating control. So I'm going to hit Start, and I want my Active Directory, users and computers. And then I'm just going to right-click on my domain and say Delegate Control. And then I'm going to hit Next, and I'm going to add in my service account. So let's say SP 2013 Service, and hit OK, and hit Next. Now, this is a custom task, so I'm going to put my little dot next to create a custom task, and I'm going to hit Next, and then hit Next. And then you're going to notice right here on the second page is my replicating directory changes. So I'm just going to put my little check right there, hit Next, hit Finish. And that just needs to be done once. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect out to central administration. And now I'm going to go into Manage Service Applications. And I'm going to click New and User Profile Service Application. And I'm going to give this a name of User Profiles. And I'm going to go ahead and use my existing web services application pool. And now it's going to ask me about those three databases. There's my profile database. Scroll on down. There's my sync database. Scroll on down. And then there's the social database. Now, the rest of the information down below is all about our My Sites, and you absolutely can go in and configure that right here. In my case, I'm going to be doing that in a later lesson, so I'm just going to leave that the way that it is, and I'm just going to hit Create. And this will take just a moment. And now, I'm going to hit OK. Now I need to start the two services. So if I go to System Settings, and I go to Manage Services, and scroll down, you're going to notice that we've got the User Profile Service and the User Profile Synchronization Service. Now the User Profile Service is going to start near instantaneously. That I just simply hit Start, and scroll down, and you're going to notice that one's done. The next one's going to take a couple of minutes. When I hit Start, it's going to prompt me for the password for my farm account. And then I'm going to hit OK. And then this is just going to take it a couple of minutes. This is a perfect time, should this be in the real world, to go off and get yourself a cup of coffee. Now that our user profile sync service is started, we can turn our attention to configuring it. The first thing that we're going to need to do to configure our user profile service is to set up a connection. A connection is simply where we're going to pull data from. Now, one of the very cool things about setting up our synchronization is the fact that we can pull data from multiple locations. So if some of the data is inside of Active Directory and some of the data is inside of a custom HR app, we can pull data from both locations. Now, if you're going to be connecting up to Active Directory, which is going to be most common, one of the very nice things is that you have the ability to point to specific OUs. So you can actually pull data from either the entire forest or just from one specific OU. And what's nice about that is that if you have certain OUs that have, say, service accounts that we really shouldn't be syncing, then I can make sure that those are left out. The next thing, after setting up our connection, that we want to turn our attention to is managing properties. Properties are all the different pieces of information that we're going to collect inside of a user profile page. Now, you're going to notice that SharePoint gives you a whole host of built-in properties, and for a lot of implementations, those will actually be just fine. But you have the ability to customize the ones that are built in, or also go in and create your own profiles. A couple of really quick items that I want to mention on our properties is that we do have the ability to control where we're going to get the data from. So like I said, we've got the ability to pull information from different sources. The way that we're going to do that is on a property by property basis. We can identify whether or not it's going to be required. And we also have the ability to work with the data type. And that data type, by the way, can be a managed metadata data type. So if you were storing, for example, job types inside of MMS, then you could pull that in and use that inside of user profiles as well. We also have a privacy setting. Now, this has changed from prior versions of SharePoint. That in the past there used to be things like colleagues and manager and so forth. Now you're going to notice it's basically just an on-off. That everyone can see this or only me, and that's it. And then down at the bottom of the property page, you're going to notice that we've got our sync option. And our sync option can be set to either import or export. There is no two-way syncing. Import simply means that whatever's inside of our source, say Active Directory, would always overwrite what's inside the user profile. Export means that whatever's inside of the user profile would overwrite whatever's inside of Active Directory or whatever our source happened to be. You also have the ability to manage user profiles from there as well. One of the things that people sometimes get concerned about is the fact that people might self-identify as something that they're not actually an expert in. Or they might put values inside of there that we just don't want. So you have the ability to create a brand new profile or to go in, grab a profile, and modify the values inside of there. So if there's something that you don't like, you can go in and clean that up as an administrator, or because of the fact that user profiles is a service application, you could also delegate that control out as well. Let's get in and take a look at how to configure our synchronization, our properties, and our profiles. I'm going to start off by going to Central Administration and clicking Service Applications and clicking User Profiles. And now I'm going to create a brand new connection. And I'm going to give this a name of Geek Trainer. And then the name of my forest is going to be geektrainer.com. And then I'm going to scroll on down and specify my Surface account username. And its password. And now let's go ahead and say populate containers. And this will allow me to choose where I want to pull my data in from. I've created an OU that I've called employees. So I'm just going to choose my employees. I'm going to scroll the rest of the way down, and I'm going to click OK. And now that we've got our connection, let's kick back and tell it to actually do the import. Now, unfortunately, we don't get a breadcrumb to go backwards. One of those things that always bugs me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to App Management, back to Service Applications, and back to User Profiles. And now you're going to notice that I can go in and just simply click Start Profile Synchronization. Now you'll also notice that there's a timer job, so I could go in and schedule my synchronization as well. In my case, I'm just going to hit Start, and I'm going to say Full, and I'm going to hit OK. Now this will take it a couple of minutes to go off and do the sync. So while that's doing its thing in the background, let's go in and take a look at our properties. So I'm going to click Manage User Properties. And inside of here are all of the built-in properties that we have. Now, the one that I want to go grab is birthday. And so I'm going to hit the little drop down on birthday, and I'm going to choose Edit. Now, inside of here, I have the ability to go in and modify a few different things here. So if I want to change the display name, then I can do that. If I wanted to give it a description, I can do that. Now, the big thing that I really want to highlight inside of here is the policy settings. And you'll notice on the policy settings that the default for birthday is going to be everyone. So everyone can see this. When it comes to user profiles, the two pieces of information that people always have the most pushback on are the profile picture and birthdays. Now, as far as the profile picture, this is one of those things that I'm a stickler on. I want a profile picture. But one of the things that I have found is people are very willing to share a picture of them if they like the picture. So a couple of different things that you could do, depending on the size of your organization, depending on your budget, is you could bring somebody in to potentially do professional shots. You could bring somebody in to maybe do a little bit of airbrushing on pictures. Or if your corporate culture would allow it, you can allow people to bring in pictures from home. And this is something that I'm a huge proponent of. That as long as yours is the only adult face in the picture, and it's not something from you in a Vegas bash weekend, I really don't care what the story is behind the picture. So if it's you holding your newborn, if it's you out playing with your dog, if it's you out finishing your first ever 10K, as long as I can very clearly see your face and yours is the only adult face in the picture, I'm okay with that. So if it comes from home, personally, I'm fine with that. I know that a lot of that's going to depend on the corporate culture. But the big takeaway that I really want you to get out of this is that people are going to be much more willing to share their profile pictures if it's a picture that they like. The other very big thing that people don't like is their birthday. One of the things that SharePoint's going to do by default is not show the year. So it will show the day, but not the year. The other thing that you could do is you could change the default policy setting to be only me. And if the user wants to override that, they can. Of course, if I wanted to force that to just be only me, then I could take that little check out. The other thing that you're going to notice here on the display settings is that I'd have the ability to remove that from the default display as well. I'm going to go ahead and leave that the way that it is with the new little value set to be only me for the privacy, and I'm going to hit OK. Now let's navigate back to our user profile service application, and let's check the status of our sync. Now what you're going to notice is that our sync is currently idle. You can see that down towards the very bottom. So let me go in and click Manage User Profiles. And so I'm going to go ahead and do a search for Christopher, and we'll hit Find, and sure enough, there I am. And so let me go in and hit the little drop down. Now, a couple of real quick things that I want you to notice. Number one is that I've got the ability to edit the profile, which is what I'm going to do in just a moment. I've got the ability to delete it if I want to go in and clean it up. But you're also going to notice that from here, I have the ability to connect to their personal site and to change who the owners are of that personal site. So that way, once again, if somebody says, does, or shares something that they shouldn't have, I have the ability to go in and clean that up. So let me go in and say Edit here. And now you're going to notice that I get a very basic screen where I can go in and change whatever value it is that I might want. Now from here, I can go in and change my value. So you'll notice that I can see all the different display information. So if I scroll down, you'll notice that I could go in and set up the title. I could set up their picture, the website. I could go in and maybe identify their email address, their office, etc. So let me go ahead and set up the office here. So let's go ahead and say maybe sunny San Diego. There we go. And then let's just scroll the rest of the way down. And then hit Save and Close. And so just like that, I'm able to go in and manage somebody's profile. The big takeaway really that I want you to get out of that little demo is just the fact that I'm always in control. So as far as the whole security, oh, I'm afraid of what my users are going to share, I always have the ability to go in and clean that up. Always. Now, beyond just working with individual users, we can also create what are known as audiences. And audiences are basically like virtual groups where there's going to be some level of commonality between them. This could be, for example, the department that they're in, the building that they work in, or maybe their job title. Now, why would we use audiences? Well, you're going to notice that when you set up different links for navigation, when you set up certain types of lists, that you can use audiences to hide the components inside of there. And basically, this is all about just making information more targeted for specific users and for specific user groups. The big thing that I want to mention about audiences is that audiences are not for security. Now, to create an audience, what we need to do is go in and set up the different rules. Now, my rules could be something about the user, so who it is that they report to, or who it is that they manage. Or I could go the other direction, which is to do it based on a property. And this is going to be the most common, so I could do this based on their building, based on their department, based on their location. Now, the big thing to keep in mind about audiences is that these are not going to be automatic. Now, my audiences must be compiled in order for them to actually take effect. Let's take a look at how to create an audience for our sales team. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Central Administration. I'm going to go back to our Service Applications and User Profiles. And then let's go in and set up our audience. So we'll say Manage Audiences, and we'll say New Audience, and we'll give this a name of Sales, and a description of the sales team. And I'm going to make myself the owner of that. And now I'm just going to leave the little dot next to satisfy all rules, hit OK. And then it's going to allow me to set up my rule. And so I want the department to be sales. And just like that, I've created my audience. Now, if you want to compile it, you can do that right away just by clicking Compile Audience, and then SharePoint will go off and do its thing. The other thing that you can do, if I go back to my App Management, Service Applications, and User Profiles, is that I can schedule my compilation. So I'm just going to click the little link next to Schedule, and we'll say Enable Scheduling, and then let's actually do this every single day. Now, one of the problems with doing this once a week, which is the default, is the fact that if somebody moved to a different department, that's not going to be reflected as far as the audience goes until the following week. Not really the best plan of attack there, so let's go ahead and just do that every single day. There is our user profiles. I'll see you in the next lesson.